we start a new chapter, which is phonemics. Phonemics, which is the study of phonemes, the distribution of the sounds in a particular environment, and using the structures approach. And here we are using the structures approach, not other approaches, please. Phonemics, which means phonemes. It's not what we did last week, is the chapter of phonetics, that is transcription, etc., different sound, etc. That is, but here we have, according to structures approach, we will use the distribution of sound and how they are pronounced and how they are perceived. Here we have, as introduction, I will go back to what you did in your schools of linguistics. Yes, schools of linguistics, as well as the applied linguistics. I refer to you to revise your lessons in schools of linguistics, because these are very important to frame you within a certain model. That is, I put you in a frame. What kind of model we are following? Therefore, here we have what we call phonemics, and then we are using the structures approach, and we will concentrate basically on the structures in America with the Leonard Bloomfield, because structuralism flourished that is and then because the other the was Ferdinand de Saussure, and he published his book La Linguistique Générale in 1916, which means beginning of the 19th century. Yes, certain trends of linguistics, like comparativist linguistics, comparative linguistics, or comparative philology. And before talking about this, that is, as a reminder of this, that is, each linguistic theory was inspired by the predominant philosophy of its time, which means predominant philosophy of each time, which means that is the philosophy that is of the most dominant philosophy, trend of philosophy at this time, that is the linguistic inspired by it. For example, as you will see in volume 2 of this series, study has always been influenced by the predominant philosophy of its time. And for example, for the Saussure was inspired by the philosophy of Durkheim. The philosophy of Durkheim, and we'll see what is it, and what is its concern, and we'll see its. We will compare it to related to language, and then. And for generativist approach, Chomsky was inspired by Zelig Harris, and we will see the same, because we need those models in order to study, to see ourselves where we are. That is because one, it helps in understanding their theory. For example, that we'll see. I will compare the theory of, that is the philosophy of Durkheim, with de Saussure and Bloomfield's ideas. And also, when we reach the generativist approach, we will do the same. Before talking about philosophy, we'll talk about something else. Until late in the 18th century, linguists, that is in the late of 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, that is, there were certain certain linguists who were concentrated on studying language families. What do we mean by language families? Studying the sound change within language families. Not any language families, but those language families must be related, which means here it gives birth to, that is, those comparativists, that is, those linguists who are comparativists. They want to compare languages to see if the languages resemble each other. Therefore, what they provided us with, the notion, what we call proto-language, which means the proto-language, which is the language which is the source of those resemblance, those languages. For example, we have, for example, and then we have proto-languages, and then certain European languages, they resemble each other, and they call themselves, that they add to this notion as a proto-European languages. And among languages that resemble each other, they group languages because they see that they have certain similarities among them. The similarities among them, if you take French, Spanish, Portuguese, Latin, they resemble each other. And if you study the sound, distribution of the sound, that is the sound change between one language and another language, you see that they occur, that they have the same, that is the same system. The rule is systematic. That is the rules are systematic. And the group also, for example, German with the English, for example, Germanic languages. They classify languages into groups. Why into groups? Because they are reconstructing languages. They are saying what are the sound, that is distribution of sound in that language and in that language. And if they find similarities and dissimilarities, that is the group sound in terms of resemblance. For example, if you take, for example, Hebrew and Arabic, Semitic, they group languages into Semitic languages, Romance languages, Hamito-Semitic languages, and Germanic languages. For example, if you take, for example, Semitic languages, you have Arabic and English, Arabic and Hebrew. Arabic and Hebrew, even if you pronounce it in Arabic, you have Arabiya and Ibriya. Even the sounds are the same, which means you differ in the placement of these sounds. And then you have, for example, Romance languages. Among Romance languages, you have French, Spanish, Portuguese, Latin. And those languages, there is Italian, and those languages, they find similar, they are similar. For example, if you compare Italian and Spanish, as if they are the same language, but they are not. But they resemble each other. And French and Spanish and Italian, they resemble, and Latin. Latin, that is because the source, they have the same source. They have the same proto-language. They have the same proto-language, which means the same, between inverted commas, the same mother language. That's why they want to see if those languages resemble each other. They group them under the same family, and they are related. That's why they call them related human languages. And they want to investigate on the study of sound change. What is the sound change? If you take German and English, you find that they have they are Germanic language, German, English, Czech, etc. They have Germanic languages, and you have Hamito-Semitic languages that are spoken in Africa, and then you have Germanic languages, Semitic languages, Romance languages, and Germanic languages. If you take, for example, German and English, and you take one word from this one, for example, I give you an example to your classes, to the previous classes. That is, you have fadar and father. You have the same sounds, except in the, which is a plosive in German, and the which is interdental in English. That is, that is in reconstructing the languages, the resemblance, that is, they want to say to see if the sounds, why the sound change from this one, and what environment affect this one. That's why the structurist approach, their aim is how the sound are perceived and transcribed and produced. This is the aim. How they are produced, how they are uttered, how they are produced, how they are spoken, how they are realized, phonetically realized. That is differentialization in phonetics, which means how they are produced and how they are distributed in the environment. In that case, for the father, you have the, where does it occur? Father. It occurs between two vowels. And the notion of two vowels, which means it occurs in intervocalic position. It occurs in intervocalic position, which means intervocalic position, which means between two vowels. This notion, this term is used in phonology. And also, that is the description of the, what we did last week, that is the is a plosive, is a stop. In other words, if we stop, total blockage of the air, therefore it is minus continuum. The air is not continuum. Therefore, we use binary features, which means either plus or minus, which means you have. That's why the word is made up of dichotomies, because of the Saussure ideas. That's why you have plus or minus, and here minus continuance. And this minus continuance plosive becomes fricative, that is, it becomes a fricative friction, because it is continuum, the air is continuity. That's why we have all, if we move from German to English, that is a stop. A stop becomes fricative. Minus continuance, plus minus, plus continuance, if it occurs, if and only if that sound occurs between two vowels. Father, father, and it becomes father. That is the, which is a fricative. It occurs between two vowels, and the schwa. And the other one is father. The, which is a stop, becomes a fricative. This is the objective. This is the reconstruction of the language. Their object of study, that is, until late in the 18th century, linguists concentrated on the study of sound change. They considered the sound change. Why that sound, that the big segment, which is a phoneme, is subject to change. And their objects of study, what do they do? And for those group, those linguists, the linguists that study this, the linguists that study this, the group of the linguists, they were called comparativist philologists or neo-grammarians. It's late 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century. And their objects of study, they study the written manuscript. That is the written manuscript of related human languages. Sorry, I will.
Guys, do you hear anything?
No, I didn't.
Me too. I guess that there's a problem with the professor.
I'm sorry for this interruption. Where were we? I'm sorry for this interruption. Are you with me?
We were in
Yes,
Yes,
written
Professor.
transcripts.
Is it shared? Yes, please. Is the slide is it shared?
Yes, Professor.
Okay. Sorry for this interruption, please.
Yeah, there is no problem.
The object of this study, the object of those linguists, which means the linguists, the comparative philologists, or they were called either comparative philosophists because they start comparing related languages because they want to group languages into families, and they will focus on the written manuscripts. Their study was based on the written manuscripts, and therefore they want to see if they find certain similarities, and the similarities that exist among those languages. That's why they group languages together to form the same origin, which means the same proto language. And their object of study was to study written manuscripts. That's why the Saussure came up with what we call two dichotomies. You have written, and here for the structuralists, for the comparative philologists, they were concentrated on the written manuscript, but for the structuralists, they concentrate on spoken utterances. Which means the spoken elements. That's why for the Saussure, he came up with what we call dichotomies opposition, in which he studied diachrony versus synchrony, writing versus speaking. And you have diachrony versus synchrony, paradigmatic versus syntagmatic, we will see it later on. And then you have langue and parole, and you have the acoustic image, that is, the word is made up of these dichotomies. Since they start reconstructing language families, families, and they base themselves on the written manuscripts. For the Saussure and his followers, they study the spoken utterance, which means the language as it is spoken in its synchrony at the moment of speaking. For the comparative philologists, they concentrated on the study of language through time, through its history. That's why they are called philologists, or historical or diachronic study of the state of written language, the historical language or the history of language. They study language through time, whereas for the structure, they study this language, especially the sound, in a particular time, which means in its synchrony as it is spoken. The goal, that is their goal of the study, was twofold, which means to reconstruct language families, which means to reconstruct, to see what are the families that they resemble each other as far as languages is concerned. And also another aim is to determine the regulation, the laws regulating the change, and the laws regulating this change, the change of that sound, which means that sound, there are certain regulations, that certain laws that determine the change of that sound through time. For example, and they are called the group of linguists. They were young linguists, and they called themselves young grammatica or neo-grammarians. Why neo-grammarians? Because they brought something new to their language, to their analysis. They brought something new to their analysis. That's why they called themselves young grammatica or neo-grammarians. And among, for their ideas, that is, they study between the late 18th century and the beginning of the century. And for them, for the sound, there is a kind of regularity, which means that is, the sound is regular, the sound change is regular, and language change was systematic. Language change was systematic, which means the system of the sound change is follow certain system, and the notion of system was introduced by de Saussure. The notion of a system was introduced by Ferdinand de Saussure. What is a system? A system is an organized body. That is, I'll go back to it. That is, for them, for the neo-grammarians, language change was systematic. For example, if you find a consonant which is a plosive minus continuum becomes a fricative, where does it occur? It occurs between two vowels in intervocalic position. Therefore, if you move from one language to another language and you find this, whenever you have a vowel which occurs between two, sound which is minus continuous, which is plosive, occurs in between two vowels, it becomes fricative in English. It follows certain, it is systematic. That is, all stops occurs in between two vowels, change to fricative in English. If you move from one language, if you say that English resembles German, that is, we have a certain system that governs the two languages. The only difference is that is, if you have a stop, a minus continuous sound occurs in intervocalic position, the term that is looked at in intervocalic position, which means between two vowels, it becomes plus continuance, which means fricative. That is what I'm using plain English, using phonological terms, which mean terminology in phonology. Is that clear? Are you following?
Yes, Professor.
Yes, Professor.
Here you have, and the study that they are concentrated on, concentrate on the diachrony, that is the development of sound through time. Compared to structuralists, they study the sound change in terms of its synchrony, which means at the moment of speaking. Here you have. They were influenced by, that is, what did I say? That is, each linguistic theory was influenced by the philosophy of each time. And for this, that is, for the comparative philologists, they were influenced by the mechanical philosophy. What does mechanical philosophy mean? The mechanical philosophy means that everything in life is related to nature, which means we human beings, we are part of nature, and automatically we follow nature, and we live in nature. This one is not new, because, for example, if you go back to your psycholinguistic or applied linguistics, that is for behaviorists, that is the behaviorists are structuralists, which means for the structures, they believe in the existence of the surface structure, and they believe in the existence, everything which is observed can be studied. Everything which is observed can be studied. Everything which is tangible can be studied. Everything which is concrete can be studied. Everything which is abstract, hidden, is not subject to their studies. Though they admit that the language is full of abstract level, but for their objective, that is their objective of studies, their goal of study is to study the surface structure. The surface structure, in that case, you have the surface structure, that is what is seen, what is observed, what is concrete. These are the major ideas of the structuralists, that is their objects of study. For example, mechanical philosophy, which means automatic change. Mechanical philosophy, everything which is related to nature is automatic change. Nature which occurs in our behavior, similarly to behavior. They say that if it's someone to acquire a language, he must be exposed to language, and he will acquire it through imitation, through learning, etc. If and only if they are exposed to environment. And environment is a part of nature, and language is no exception. Language is subject to change because it is related to human beings, and human beings is close to nature. Therefore, that is, things are interrelated. Things are interrelated. Suppose that you have, for example, if it is winter, we wear thick clothes. If it is summer, we change our clothes. Depending on the nature, the force of nature, which means governs our behavior. This is the philosophy. This is for the comparativist philosophy, philology. This type of that is here, they were influenced by the mechanical philosophy, which claimed that everything in nature is subject to mechanical automatic change. Mechanical, which means automatic change. That language is no exception. And language, because nature is subject to change, language is subject to change because the human being is subject to change because he is related to nature. For example, the language that is spoken in the 16th century is not the language that is spoken nowadays. Even the language when I was young, it's not the language that is used, that is spoken now in Moroccan Arabic. And what was taboo before, they are no longer taboo nowadays. The change, because that is, we are following the mechanical philosophy, that is automatic change. If nature changes, automatically everything is subject to change. This is the philosophy. Similarly, they opt for this for the comparativist philologists. This type of study of speech is part. This type of study. Sorry. Structurist, sorry for this interruption. Structurist linguistic influence. This type of the study of speech is part of the discipline called comparative philology, the study of history of language, since it compares the historical, the chronic study of related language. What do we mean by comparative philology? Which means diachronic study of language, which means the study of language through time. And it is compared to, which means diachronic study of time, the see this development of sound through time. And this one is not new. This one, the structures approach opts for this. That's why, in order to study language in its to study it in terms of its diachrony. We see the differences that exist between the two. For example, if we move, this is why I use this one, because to see, to focus within, to see yourself where you are, which means within the frame, the model that you are opting. I give you a certain historical background to see where you are, because you cannot work without it. That is why the structure is out for the spoken utterance, for the synchrony. Why? What other reason? Because here they want to reconstruct language families, which means not any language families, but related language families, and determine certain regulation. Because, for example, for the neo-grammarians, they use certain regulations, certain systems, certain rules in studying the distribution of sounds, though within related families. For example, according to them, they find, for example, if I give you an example, for that is for there is a kind of regulation in terms of sound. Of sound change. For example, you have, for example, the verb keep. Keep originally was regular. You add ed participle at the end. You come up with keep the. Look at this one. That is, that's a p that you pronounce is followed by ed, but the ed, that is, you feel that a p is neither strong, and it's not voice, it's neither pure p nor pure p, it's in between. Because of what? Because that sound has affected the pronunciation of p. But since the speech is continuum, therefore you come up with kept, and the lengthening of the vowel, it blocks the production. That's why the vowel which was long, it becomes short. That's why we have called kept. This one, this is this is why neo-grammarians, that is in young grammatica, suggest that you have for the sound, for the sound is, there are certain laws which governs those sounds, and also that is for them another reason behind this one, that is ideas that were introduced by the neo-grammarians, that is everything in language is subject to explanation. That's why it's subject to explanation, because for them language change was systematic. It's subject to explanation. If you don't find any explanation, you relate it to analogy. What do we mean by analogy? Is qiyas. That is, for example, if you want to create a new word, that is, you have to use it, that is, to have a recourse to other words that resemble this by using analogy. For example, I give you an example of burger. Burger is considered as a root, and before, originally it was only hamburger. A hamburger, which means hamburger, that is, you have the root, which is burger, and ham is a suffix, and the suffix, but this suffix is a free inflectional morpheme. We'll see it in morphology, because there are some inflectional morpheme which are, most inflectional morpheme are bound morpheme, but there are some free inflectional morpheme, which, that is, those inflectional morpheme are not bound, but they are free. And here we have what we call a hamburger, and whatever you stuff that burger, you can change it. For example, via analogy, create a new word via analogy by changing only the suffix, which is the prefix, which is ham, and you can come up with the cheeseburger, beef burger, chicken burger, etc. This is done via analogy, and this one creates, that is thanks to them that we have this analogy, and the verb that is changed from the regular to irregular, that is because they don't accept exception, and everything for them is subject to change. And this one, this kind of rule is called, according to the neo grammar, is called analogical leveling, which means you move from regular to irregular via certain regulation, certain transformation. That is the verb which is originally regular. In that case, it is irregular. That is, you have ed, but you have a p has affected, which is a progressive assimilation. It assimilates a certain feature of a p, and it becomes a t. Therefore, you have kept, and both of them are plosive, and therefore that p, we will see it, is unreleased, because you have the air is blocked. And release, the air is not released at the end, because we have two successive sounds, which are stop sound p and t. And then that's phonologically speaking, that combination of two unreleased sounds creates certain change in the term of vowels. That is, the vowel which is long becomes very short. That's why we have a certain, we will see in morphophonemics, the ordering of the rules is a must. That is, you have the cluster of two unreleased sounds create, that is, must occur before the vowel, which that is lengthening, that is the shortening of vowel, the process of shortening, that is long vowel is shortened because of the process of two unreleased sound at the end in final position. This one, why I'm saying this thing, that is, even in your data, when you analyze, to give me some reasons. What are the reasons? And you have to follow certain regulations, certain rules, and you have to order the rules. This one is not new for either for the generativists or for the structurists. It was adopted by the comparative philologists. And this one, that is, whatever we have, you have to go back to other theories, to other schools before. Everything is subject, that is, it is not done haphazardly. It was done through certain, either you adopt from other schools and you add, and something which is not adequate enough you try to solve it. This is a kind of circle. That is, you have, for example, you have structurist approach, and then it moves to neo-structuralism, which means by Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, that is, it's no longer that is Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Their belief, that is, they are not pure structuralists, that is classical structuralists. They notice that their theory is not adequate enough to solve all the problems. That's why they start recognizing that is there in language we need to introduce in our theory the abstract level. Similarly, for example, if I give you an example from syntax, descriptive syntax that you use. Oh, I'm so sorry. So sorry, I'm coming. Sorry. Are you with me? Are you still with me?
Yes,
Yes,
Professor.
Yes, Professor.
Sorry for this interruption. I'm so sorry.
no problem, Professor.
For
It's okay.
I will add 15 minutes. This type of the study of speech is part of the discipline called comparative philology, which means either they were called neo-grammarians, comparative philosophy. They start comparing languages, not any kind of languages, but related languages, or comparative or philology, or historical linguistics. So historical linguistics is mean diachronic study of language through time. For the structuralist linguists influenced by the philosophy of Durkheim. Durkheim was positivist, which means the philosophy of positivism. What does Durkheim say? Durkheim says that society shapes the individual. Society consists of social facts. People's action can be explained by social norms they have been exposed to, which means I will explain. According to, and I will explain and I will compare. That is, for Durkheim, he was positivist. That is for comparative philologists, the neo-grammarians of the late 18th, 19th century. They were inspired by the mechanical philosophy. This one, mechanical philosophy, which is related to nature. That is, a human being is closely related to nature. Without nature, we cannot survive because we are exposed to nature. We are brought up within the open air. Is that clear? For Durkheim was positivism, was a positivist. And the philosophy is a philosophy of positivism, philosophy of positivism. And for this one, that is for automatic change, that is the mechanical philosophy is the philosophy of John Locke. The philosophy of John Locke, which means the philosophy of John Locke, which means the nature governs the law of human beings. that is human beings are governed by nature, by laws made by nature. And this one, the mechanical philosophy, is John Locke philosophy, which is natural law, natural relation, natural philosophy. But Durkheim philosophy is philosophy of positivism. The philosophy of positivism, what does it say? That is, it says that society shapes the individual, which means society, look at this one. If you take, for example, behaviorism, if the child wants to acquire language or to learn language, what does he do? He must be part of society. That is, without being exposed to language, he cannot acquire language, the child. Similar to that is, society shapes the individual. The society shapes the individual. What does the John Locke's mechanical philosophy say? It says that nature governs a human being, which means the natural context governs a human being, similarly to behaviorists. That is, without nature, without society, we cannot acquire language, because human beings is born with tabula rasa, with a blank slate. That's why the structurist approach, they believe in the existence of the surface structure. Their objective of study is to study only the surface structure, what is observed, what is seen, what is tangible, what is concrete. Is that clear? You see now the link? John Locke mechanical philosophy is related to nature, and nature governs the law, the language, the law. What is the law? Governs the human being as well as the language, because language, nature, and human beings are interrelated. Similarly to Durkheim philosophy, that is, society shapes the individual. Society consists of social facts. That is, society shapes the individual, because society is the one which gives the norms that the human beings should follow. Is that clear? Which means we are following social facts that is part of nature. For example, if you take, for example, if you want, for example, yes, please. Mute your mic.
احنا خدامين في رمضان نوقفوا ان شاء الله حتى شهر 6 ويقدر يكون شي بروغرام ديال الصيفيه.
Mute your mic.
ان شاء الله.
Please mute your mic.
ان شاء الله الا كانت شي حاجه انا غنعلمكم. لا ما غيكونش نفس التوقيت في الصيفيه، نقدروا نبدلوا. المهم من هنا لتما ان شاء الله يكون خير.
Can you mute your mic, Safa? Safa.
قولي الاسم، حيت ما طلعليش شي اسم هنايا. هذه هي النمره اللي سجلتي في الدوسي. صافي واخا غنسجلها. لا كون هانيه الا خرجت شي بلاصه نعيط لك. صافي واخا انت سجلتيهم معايا ديجا ولا لا؟
Safa. This is online teaching.
من الاحسن اجي سجلهم باش كيبقى لي الدوسي ديالهم، كنشبر لهم النوبه ديالهم، فهمتي؟ باش غير كتخوى البلاصه. انتينا تقدر تجي اليوم.
Professor, I think you can mute her.
How? How?
By clicking on her name.
I see. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Professor.
This is, I hate online teaching, you know? You have influenced by Durkheim. influenced by their time philosophy, which means philosophy of their time, which means philosophy of positivism. That is a positivism. That is society shapes the individual, and society consists of social facts, which means that is we are following certain facts in society, certain facts, certain regulation in society. For example, if you are a student, you can follow certain regulation at the university. You cannot behave in the same way. For example, suppose that Safa is in the classroom, for example, I am talking about myself. That is, I'm at home. Therefore, someone knocks at the door. I have to answer that person, etc. If I was in the university, which means it's not the case. That is, we are regulated by, we are governed by certain norms, by certain facts. That's why certain society provide us with certain behavior that we have to follow. And also, that is, people's action can be explained by social norms. That is, social norms. If that is normally that is Safa was at work, and therefore she's supposed to answer. Maybe she's a teacher, or maybe she's a director. I don't know, because of the list, etc. This is what I understood from her conversation. This one. This one, that is, she's following the norms according to the context. That's why the context in the structured approach is very important. The structured approach gives much importance to the context, because through the context, that is what they believe in. That is, here the structuralists admit only one level of linguistic analysis, namely surface structure. Which means for them, the surface structure is very important. That is, they want to analyze the speech as it is spoken, as it is produced, as it is perceived, and as it is transcribed. They cannot add anything to it. Which means, because for them the only level that exists is the surface structure. The only level that exists is the surface structure. That's why for them the surface structure is very important in studying any sound, any utterance. That's why, for example, here structuralist linguists influenced by the philosophy of Durkheim. Durkheim was positivist, and he provided us with that is, society shapes the individual. Which means the context, what is seen, and society, what is seen, it is observed. Similarly for the structuralists, even for the psychological part of the structuralism, they base themselves on what we call behaviorism, and behaviorism. Acquire language, he must be if he wants to acquire language, he must be exposed to language. He must within the context of language. Without the context, he cannot, according to that is, they cannot acquire a language. Similar to this one, that is the structures. What is the difference between structuralism and the comparativists? That is the structuralist language. They focus on the individual structures. The comparative philosophies, comparative philologists, this language related language families. What do they move from language families to the sound structure of individual language? That is what they see. For the comparativists, according to structure, the comparative are too broad in understanding, in analyzing the sound. They focus on that is too general, just to compare two languages in order to group them under certain family. But for us, we take from them, but there are certain inadequacies for the language, for the comparative philologists. For us, we change from language families to the sound structure of a particular language. We want to study language in its synchrony at a particular time, how the sound is uttered, is produced within particular period of time and within individual language. For them, related languages, but for them, for the structures only the sound structure of individual languages or an individual language. The object of the study for the structures is set of spoken utterance. They were used written, manuscript. For them is spoken utterance. That is a written manuscript. That is the change. But here is a written utterance. You have a written manuscript, related families, but individual, that is sound structure of individual language, and spoken utterance. You see the change. That is, we take from them something which is new, which is feasible, which is adaptable, and then we add new thing, which is, that is, if you want to get more reliable data, more reliable results, we need to study language in its synchrony, because language is subject to change, and the sound was spoken, what was uttered, produced before, is not similarly produced the same as in its synchrony. Because if you take, for example, for your young generation, that is young generation nowadays, that is for t, that is in either for in Arabic, the t split, merge into one sound. The th and t merge into one sound. In Moroccan young generation, that is for the t sound, that is, it becomes a ch, khalshi. Why? That ch, which is the fricative, originally that ch, which is affricate sound, before it was pronounced just in the Al-Gharb region. Moulay Bouslam, Qnitra, etc. They produce the ch. But nowadays, all over, that is, young generation starts using this t becomes a ch. Because of what? A regulation that we have, that ch is a fricative. Since the ch is a fricative, it spreads its regulation to other elements. It spreads to other elements, the friction. That's why that t, it becomes a ch affricate, and then the t, it becomes a sh, that is we have double articulation, that is stop, and then the stop is released by using the sh sound. Therefore we have a double articulation here, two places of articulation differently, similar to this. And then here we have the object of the study for the structure is set of spoken utterance. That is spoken utterance. Why? Because the sound is subject to change, but we are interested to have more reliable result. That's why we use the study of the sound, the production of the sound, the phonetically, the realization of the sound as it is produced in particular sound in particular period, which means in its synchrony. That's why for those also came up with dichotomies. We have what we call dichotomies, what we call the diachrony of study and synchrony. That is for a comparative, the focus on diachrony, but for the socio, he focused mainly on synchrony, because synchrony you get better results. And then, for example, you have what we call long parole and long, etc. And then the spoken utterance, that is the spoken utterance, which means what we call spoken utterance is called data or corpus. And the difference between data and corpus, that corpus is larger than data. The data is smaller than corpus. If you more reliable results, you need to gather to have more corpus. if that is data is that is less reliable. But anyway, that is what is data and what is corpus are speech, natural speech occurring. That is, you collect the data. What do you mean you collect the data? You collect natural speech, occurring speech, which means the speech, how it is produced, how it is perceived, how it is transcribed, you get rid. In that case, you come up with, in order to, for what purpose? In order to determine the sound system of an individual language. Why? In order to introduce, to determine, that is for the sake of determining, that is that sound, the system that governs that sound. Because if you put the sound in diachrony, you cannot provide a certain system, valid system. But when it is produced in its synchrony, you can produce, you can determine that is where it occurs, how it occurs, and what kinds of processes that govern this one, what kind of changes that occur in this sound. We'll see it in the following data. The notion and the system, the notion of a system was introduced by the Saussure. And what is a system? Is a body of organized body that is of related elements. For example, if I give you an example, the man in blue. The man in blue is the man in blue. Yes. In blue is wearing, is my friend. If I underline the man is in blue, I would say is a prepositional phrase. Yes, but there are many prepositional phrases, and you know that prepositional phrase sometimes it behaves like complement, it behaves like adjective, it behaves like adverbial, etc. But here I would say it is a complement adjective. How do I know that it is an adjective and a complement? Because of the element that is precede this prepositional phrase, and the element that precedes the category that precedes in the prepositional phrase is a noun. The man is a noun. What kind of noun? Is a common noun, and the common noun, as far as my knowledge is concerned, is that it must be attached to certain specifiers or determiners. But the determiner that you use here, it is a definite article. Definite and determiners, they can be possessive pronoun, they can be quantifiers, they can be many. But here we have this definite article, that is article, but definite article, it is defined. Defined, which means if I say the man is my friend, who is the man? I give more clarification about this one, because if you say the man is my friend, who is that man? The meaning is not clear. You need to clarify who is that man, because the definite article is defined. Therefore, in blue, the man in blue, and in blue is an adjective. How come it is an adjective and it is prepositional phrase? But here, prepositional phrase, it is subject to reduction, because normally it is a relative clause. And the relative clause, what kind of relative clause? You have a defined relative clause, and this one it has been subject to change because of certain reduction. Therefore, the man who is wearing a blue, or he is in a blue, is wearing a blue suit, is my friend. Therefore, that is a kind of that is reduced, defining, or restrictive adjectival clause. That's why we have here that is un système, according to the Saussure. He said that la langue est un système dont tous les termes sont solidaires, which means tous les termes sont solidaires, which means there is a solidarity among elements. If you, that is the body, everything that you add, you account for it. It affects the meaning. For example, if I give you an example, the man with the telescope is my friend. That is the man with telescope. Here it is subject. It's a subject. The man with the telescope. Here with the who is holding a telescope. But when I change the man with the telescope, I put it after the verb in a predicative case. I saw the man with the telescope. That is here, it's ambiguous. That is, the structure creates ambiguity. What is the ambiguity? Where does the ambiguity lie? Because of the existence of the verb see. I saw I saw the man with a telescope, which means the man with the telescope is ambiguous. Either you see the man who is holding the telescope, or you see the man through using the telescope. Is that clear? When you change the place of elements and you add and you omit, etc., the meaning is affected. Therefore, according to de Saussure, he said he introduced what we call a notion of a system because it's very important in understanding the meaning. And for when we reach Chomsky, when we reach the generativist approach, we will see that is for components of the levels are interrelated. It's not like the structuralist. Though the notion here is paves the way to the generativist approach. Here we have the notion of a system. According to de Saussure, he said, la langue est un système dont tous les termes sont solidaires. Language is a system, that is, language is a system in which all elements are interrelated, are all the category that you use in a discourse, in a language, in a discourse, language, a message, etc., is related. That is, you miss one thing, the meaning is affected or the meaning it changes. Is that clear? The not organized group, that is to refer to unorganized related groups of elements, along with the set of statements for choosing among those elements, which means what is a system? It refers to an organized related group of elements, along with the set of statements for choosing among those elements. What does it mean? That is, you choose the main ideas, that is through those elements, one element is the key. For example, I give see is the verb see, which provided us with a certain ambiguity. And this see is also related to the subject, which is I, which means un système dans tous les termes sont solidaire, everything that is are interrelated. Everything in a discourse is interrelated. You cannot, that is, if you miss, for example, if you change the apostrophe or something else, you change the meaning. You have to pay attention to this in your writing. The analysis of data is inspired by the positive, and another element of positivism, that is, you have the put emphasis on the experiment. That is the experimental technique. That is experimental technique, which means the data you need to experiment, you have to experience, to use experiment. Also, you have to account it by giving us valid justification, reliable data, valid justification, etc., through reasoning, because that is the philosophy of positivism. That is, philosophy is based on the reasoning, on logic. Similarly, in analyzing data, we follow the same structure. The structurist approach was started by de Saussure in Europe and developed further by Leonard Bloomfield in North America, which means that is the structuralist in 1916 by de Saussure, that is they start in Europe. And then it was divided into many schools, like functionalist school in France, like Londonian school, etc. But it flourished mainly in especially 1933 by Leonard Bloomfield. Thanks to Leonard Bloomfield, he discovered what we call certain ways of analyzing the distribution, relation, and the distribution of the sound with the certain techniques. And those techniques are or ways are called procedure, a discovery procedure to analyze the distribution, because their aim is to study the sound system of individuals And through these procedures that we can use to study Arabic, French, English, Spanish, etc. Thanks to Bloomfield that we have this procedure. That is, it becomes and amongst the procedures technique, you have overlapping, you have free variation, and you have defect phoneme. Defect phoneme. Yes, the structuralists admit only one level of linguistic analysis, which is namely surface structure. That is, they analyze. Why did we admit the surface structure? Because they want to analyze speech as it is produced, as it is perceived, and as it is transcribed. That is, what I see in the data, I can analyze it. The data at hand, I can analyze it. If it is not seen to me, I cannot analyze it. Look at this one. Answers to any question related to data. Any answer that you have to give me is related to data, not to what you have in mind. Because what you have in mind, I cannot see it. I can see only what is in the data. Which means everything which is observed, which is linked, which is related to data, because the data is observed, because it is seen, can be studied. Otherwise, the analysis is not valid. If you give me example from not the data, which is not in the data, it's not valid. Therefore, it is wrong. Because what they believe in the surface structure. And we observe the data, that is, we study, and therefore answer must be related to the data. Everything which goes beyond the data, I cannot be valid. It cannot be considered as exact. Therefore, what is related to data can be studied. Analysis referring to invisible entities are not admissible in the because they don't believe in the what we call who believe in the two levels, which means the surface level and the underlying representation or the abstract level. And to relate the two levels, you need to have what we call the rule, because at the beginning for generative approach they call themselves generativists, but later the school name of generative grammar to translation generative grammar, because they relate from English. What are you reading? If you were, for example, if you are in S3, that is, and your teacher asks you what is the category of this the function of what, the answer is directly no. And normally read is a monotransitive, is فعل متعدي متعدي, which means transitive, and it has one object, and the object therefore that is why we have it in the other sentence. Originally, the abstract level for this is U tense B ing B read, and then what? What is WH word function as direct object, but since it is a question, it has been subject to transformation. It moves to the beginning of the sentence. Therefore, in 1965, it is known as a preposing structure, preposing rule. Preposing rule, which means the WH word has been preposed, has been moved to the beginning of the sentence, which is the what. And this one, that's why they recognize two levels of structure, two levels of structure, which means the surface structure and the underlying representation or the abstract level, but you relate it via certain rules, and those rules must be ordered because they put emphasis on emphasize the importance of ordering of the rules, because if you don't order the rules, it will block the rules. That's why for the structurist paradigm, that is, they don't believe in the existence of the abstract level. For the abstract level, they believe on the surface structure. That's why even in the psychological part, you have the behaviorism, empiricism, and behaviorist. The behavior, you can see it, and empiricist, you base in experience. Therefore, experience is based on something which is observed. Therefore, everything, even in the psychological parts of their analysis, they keep the same ideas. They have the same ideas. The sound and the remainder of this file outlines the structure analysis of sound structure. What we are using here, we are using the structures analysis of sound structure, which means the sound, according to the structuralists, Bloomfieldian structuralists, that is, their aim is to study language. What are they? How they realize? What do we mean by how are they phonetically realized? Which means that is they want to investigate in the sound, that is the sound of language. What are they? How many sounds that we have, and what are they? And how are they pronounced? This is how are they phonetically realized. And how are they? Because the distribution of sound, that is, sound is pronounced in this context different, and in this context different. That is, look at this one. If we take the sound, look at this one. Play in the data. This one, the data. The data here, what we see. Look at this one. You have play. Look at this one. I'm using narrow transcription, not broad transcription. You have to use it between label brackets. And you have here paths, and you have kept, you have power, you have fuel, you have slats. Look at this one. You have here. Here you have a p that occurs in, that is the same. You see what is repeated in the whole data. We feel that the p is repeated in all the words transcribed. You have here initial position between s and the r. Here we between a vowel and the s. Here is initial position followed by a vowel. Everything we have to account for it. Every single thing. That is, I'm using the position. That is here initial position, but it is followed by l. Here it is for initial position, but it is followed by a vowel. Here it is in between s and the r. Here we have a p between a and the s. Look at this one. If I take this one and you take this one, that is, here is consistent. Here it is consistent, the data p. P, it is followed by a vowel, pot. And you have here pot, you have a r, which is, that is preceded by a vowel. If a vowel followed by a r, the r is dropped and it becomes long. This is what we have. And here we have a monosyllabic word. It is a monosyllabic word, therefore it creates certain stress and distress, that is creates certain aspiration, and we come up with a pat. That is the diacritic that is we have here is a co-articulation. Do you remember? Co-articulation. Therefore, we are using narrow transcription. Similar to this one, we have a diphthong, and diphthong is realized as one vowel, and it is related here as one vowel by tie bar. And since it is a monosyllabic word, it is stressed, and therefore it is cause certain. Here we have a certain stress that creates certain aspiration. Similarly to peel, here a vowel that is stressed monosyllabic word creates, therefore with the aspiration that is says, that is, I want to describe, that is the change. The P is aspirated if and only if it is in initial position followed by a vowel. And the vowel must be stressed. And the monosyllabic word, the vowel is, that is, the stress is predictable. Look at this one. Here you have kept, hopped, slept. You have a P followed by it, a P followed by the vowel is not, because it is shortened, hopped. P followed by it, P followed by it, and it becomes voiceless because of P. And here we have P, which is voiceless, stop, 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 stop. Therefore, that's a P. That is the air, because juxtaposed position of two stop, two plosive, the air is not released, it is unreleased sound. That's why we have this one, unreleased. But here we cannot describe this one, because the placement here, it is in unreleased in final position, followed by consonant. Here it is in aspirated in initial position, followed by a vowel. But here we cannot describe the, that is the distribution of a P, because sometimes it is initial position, sometimes between a consonant S and R, sometimes in between A and this one. Therefore, it is not. And here we will see the discovery procedure, and we will stop here. See you in 2 weeks' time because of the vacation next week. Any question? And we will see the distribution. Any question? No questions? No questions?
No
Thank you. Thank you. And
Thank you, Professor.
same to you. Bye-bye. Have a nice
Thank you.
weekend.
Good day.
Have a nice holiday.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Professor. Bye-bye, guys.